Is your new year still falling flat? Do you avoid stairs with multiple steps? You are not alone. This year, millions will be diagnosed with low energy or low E. But there's a cure. Now through January 31st, join Planet Fitness for just $1 down, $10 a month, no commitment. With clean, spacious clubs and tons of equipment, you can boost your energy after just one workout. Leave low E behind and find your big fitness energy at Planet Fitness. Join in the free PF app for $1 down, $10 a month. Cancel anytime. Deal ends Tuesday, January 31st. See Home Club for details.
Here we are in a weird place.
Well, are you meaning that physically or mentally?
In all possible ways, I guess.
I think that's
metaphysically. Metaphysically. So
Metaphysically.
if you say physically or in other ways, does metaphysically take care of all the other ways too?
I don't know that it takes care of all the other ways, but it certainly does take care of as many as we care about.
As many as we care to talk about or
We just
not.
don't care.
Yeah, because here we are. And if the listener is very, very tuned into the broadcast.
Okay, so that discounts most of our listeners, right?
No, they're
No?
a very, very engaged group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but here we are. And if you listen, there's an ambient sound, which we most of the time work very hard to eliminate.
Yes.
But today,
Going to be difficult to do that.
can't do it.
No, because there's a plane going by right now.
Right,
And the reason that becomes important is that we are sitting outside.
right.
We are in the northeastern United States, and we're sitting outside right now. And there's a long story that goes with all of that.
And with our luck, this plane's going to come and crash right over our heads
I
right now.
believe the plane is actually landing on us. Hold
Watch
on,
out,
let me-
Tom.
Let me help with this a little. I don't know if you heard it there, but in the distance there is a small plane
Right,
flying
right.
directly over our heads. And so we are sitting outside. The last time actually that we did a podcast was back at the very beginning of January 2020.
Wow.
And
Wow. It's
I
been
know,
that long.
It's unusual. It's 6 months later now.
Yeah, you look a little older to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, just
Thank
a
you.
little.
Yeah.
Nothing inappropriate for 6 months.
Oh.
Although it's been a hell of a 6 months,
See,
which explains why
yeah.
we're here.
I'm surprised I don't look even older than
Yeah.
that. Yeah, exactly. It does explain that because we are. Oh, good. We're suddenly at JFK Airport
Here
now.
comes another plane, and here comes the wind. And there's a blue jay coming down for the tree right now. We are under a tree as well.
We are under a tree, which take it or leave it. That's where we are, and it's you're going to hear these noises, so we apologize. Nonetheless, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
We were actually the last time we were sort of outside, and we were sitting in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
That's right.
And we did the last podcast there.
Blissfully ignorant as the entire world was, with the exception of Dr. Fauci,
Right.
of what was about to descend on us.
Right. And it was happening in China,
Yeah.
in Asian countries at the
Right.
time, and a few other places too. And in fact, may have been happening in the U.S. as well, and European countries without the complete recognition. And speaking from the U.S. point of view, I can say that there really was no recognition at that point.
There
of-
still isn't
there-
by a large number of people.
in many cases, absolutely. It's been an interesting few months. So what have you been doing?
Hanging out under this tree.
That's it. Just out on the tree. In the northeastern United States, since this thing kind of kicked into gear in the U.S. in mid to late February when we started.
Yeah,
really
we are
going
talking
over it.
about COVID.
Oh, we are. We're talking about the pandemic.
right,
That if
right.
you weren't aware or you're listening to this years later and aren't sure what the heck we're talking about. Yes, we're talking about COVID-19 caused by the coronavirus, which has become a worldwide pandemic and is forcing us outside here and forcing us. It's a beautiful day in the northeastern United States right now.
Well, that's what's so hard about this. That is, if you're feeling okay and you don't know you're sick, and it's a beautiful day and it's summertime, and you want to stay stupid to the facts, you just blissfully go on as if nothing's going on. But then something big is really going on.
It's still going on, right? But we want to talk about it. I mean, for those of you who are listening while we're still in the pandemic, which I hope many of you are, not so that the pandemic
we
keeps
don't
going.
know that many of them are in the pandemic, but they are in the pandemic, whether they know it or not. Is that what you meant?
Okay, we'll go with that.
Because if they're not, then they've been seriously affected by the pandemic.
Let's not go that direction. Mainly what I was trying to say is that you listen to it soon after it's released. That's all I was really trying to say. But nevertheless, so that the pandemic is affecting everything. There's no way around it.
And why, therefore, are we outside suffering airplane sounds and bird calls?
Well, we're outside simply because we don't want to be inside with the greater potential of the spread of an infection.
There we go.
From it,
right?
Because of the aerosol effect of doing it and speaking rather loudly, as I tend to do when I get annoyed with you. That is worse, because that they're telling us anyway, and I'm just going by what the scientists are telling me. That that a lot of speaking and that kind of stuff. I'm also a trained theater actor, and I tend to spit a lot when I talk. That seems to go with the training.
That's part of it, right? When you isn't there like a class in acting?
In spitting?
It's like the third or fourth class in basic acting 101.
Intro to acting.
Yes, yeah. Which is all about spitting and Shakespeare. There's a whole connection, I think.
Spitting Shakespeare.
Yes.
It's called.
And I think you have to do one of his comedies and one of his dramas with spit.
Tragedy's much more fun while you're spitting.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Lear is King Lear is
it's
fun.
spitful.
The couple of the speeches near the end are you can take a shower right there.
It's full of spit.
Oh, it's all over the place. Yeah.
So did you pass those tests?
I passed with flying colors. Yes,
you did.
I did. And as a result, I even though we're probably 9 feet apart here, I could probably take a shot at reaching you. If
no,
you'd like me
never
to.
mind.
Oh, okay. I'm also facing a different direction, so it's we're doing it the right way.
So we're doing social distanced podcasting.
Social distance.
We are
podcasting.
we are socially distant, and
yes.
We couldn't be if we were in the studio.
I may be mentally distant during this as well. It's very possible.
Well, that's no surprise. We can fill in the gaps there.
Thank you very much. By the way, just in case anyone's really wondering, what the heck have I stumbled onto? I'm Tom Peterson.
And I'm Dean Foster.
And
oops, your culture's showing.
That's right. It's showing, and it's really kind of odd right now, along with most of the things that are going on in the world.
It's too strange a time, but we felt so compelled to get back in the saddle, as we Americans say, and even
go ahead,
though
mix as many metaphors as you'd like here.
Right.
Go for it.
And even though the elephant's in the room, let's get back on the saddle.
Well, the elephant is on the horse, and it's not going well.
Not going well.
Another problem that's happening.
Part of the reason why we're not handling this pandemic well at all. Here in apocalyptic America, 2020.
Oh yeah.
What a year.
At any rate, where I was going before we did the beginning and the whole entrance thing to the show, I was going to say that we've been inundated day after day after day with information, both accurate and incredibly, insanely inaccurate. But it's over and over. Every time you turn on any kind of news type show, you end up talking about it again. When you get together, when you can actually safe social distance, mask wearing get together with friends, you end up talking about it, and it's just constant. So one of the things that Dean and I talked about before we started this today was just that we can't ignore this. You can't ignore it.
This is an elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
This is
Sitting on a horse.
Sitting on a horse with a
gorilla.
saddle that I'm trying to get on.
Uh-huh. Well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Okay.
And we, nevertheless, is there a cultural perspective of...
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, of how different groups and different countries have reacted to this.
Is there a cultural element
Absolutely.
to what's going on?
Absolutely, is there?
There's so many. So many. Let's start with one.
Well, we only have so much time, so...
Here's the hat. It's in the middle of the table because we're socially distanced.
Yes.
And inside the hat are all these cultural pieces to this question.
Is that what's in
Let's
there?
just pull one out. Let's just...
Okay.
Wait,
all right, reach
but
in.
wait a minute. And I have hand sanitizer.
Yeah, get the hand
here.
sanitizer out.
So, okay. Oh, by the way, I
Yeah.
don't know what this is. This is like, that when you leave hand sanitizer out after a while and you've used it,
Yeah.
at the top where it squeezes out,
The little dry thing?
the little dry thing,
Yeah.
and it looks like a booger. or that,
Now, let's
or
pull-
that
pull-
booger
should we-
glue, that booger glue.
booger glue.
That sticks to the credit. You get the credit
Should we
card.
clarify booger for our international listeners?
Isn't that a universal English word?
It may be.
Probably not.
You're
There are very
the
few.
guy.
Yeah, there are very few universal English words other than the basic grammar. So, yeah, probably not. Okay, so what's a booger? Well, this is my question because I don't know if this came from the hand sanitizer
Uh-huh.
or from my nose.
oh.
I don't.
I will. I was just going to say I will pass on the hand sanitizer, but that doesn't really help, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No.
All right. Moving on. These are the challenges we face in this world. These are new challenges. We don't. From
This
now
is
on,
the hell we're going through.
every day, these little micro abuses.
Yes.
And micro nouvelle things that we have to deal with.
Do you
Micro
have any
nouvelle.
idea what you're talking
Micro
about
nouvelle.
right now?
Wasn't he a broadcaster?
I thought he was a singer. I thought he
singer.
used to sing in
Yeah.
Vegas in a lounge act.
Yeah, he did.
Anyway,
I think for a while.
It's a quick definition. In the U.S., the term booger is used as
Are we really talking about
dried mucus from typically your nose. And it is a favorite with especially, and I'm going to be gender specific with this, especially young boys may even tend to remove them from their nose and consume them through their mouth.
Oh, no.
What?
This is true, though.
Am I telling something that isn't?
No, and you know what? We are at a point in life and in the world where let's just, it's true. You
have to speak truth. Well,
You
especially
can't
in a
ignore
world
this.
that is in a world which is surrounded with lack of truth,
lack
or
of truth. That's
confused truth, to be nice about maybe something I don't need to be nice about.
And COVID really kind of reveals all this, I mean, it makes it evident. I mean, here we are
It
talking
does.
we're talking, it's a huge metaphor for our condition. We're talking about mucus here. And
Okay, be honest. Did you see us going to mucus at this point in the
absolutely not.
podcast? No. It's
Let's go back to the paper in the hat and pull out a cultural element.
let's pull something out of the hat.
Because I did use the hand sanitizer, and that's where it happened. And now
You removed it.
and I removed it, and
Okay.
now it's gone.
All right.
It's gone.
So I'm sure in other cultures there are terms for the same thing, and often in many cases the same problems arise.
I would like to know actually
that.
if
Yeah,
if
that's
a
how
listener
much-
would,
That'd be great.
who speaks English as not as a first language, if they would share
Right.
with us the term for booger in their culture.
In their culture, yeah, and any other information
I would
about
like
it that
to
you think
know.
is specific, it could be very interesting. We might end up doing an entire podcast on that.
I think we're doing it right now.
Oh, by the way, we do have our producer Torin with us here today. Say hello, Torin.
Hello. How are you?
He's remote, which I've thought that about him for years, actually.
Yes.
But he is remote. Again, with that tip of the hat to the pandemic and trying to stay safe and do the smart things.
Right, the right thing. And that's our condition right now, So how you feeling, Tor?
Oh, I'm as well as can be. I'm doing
Hope things are good for you.
Yeah, things are good.
Good. It's just difficult all around, and so I'm gonna apologize as one of the people that takes care of the technical and the editing on this particular broadcast. It may have a variety of things besides the planes that went over earlier in the podcast that happened with it, but given the pandemic, I think it's a lot better than if we called it in on our cell phones.
Yeah, right. And this is I mean, here we are. It's calling out honesty, right? You go on a Zoom call now, and it's an important business meeting, and the baby cries and the dog walks by in the background, and everybody knows it's okay, and they see you sitting there in your polo shirt if you're a guy, and your pajamas under the table.
Maybe you've got nothing on down there. Now let me bring that up to you. Here's a cultural thing,
and we're all accepting it. This is reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I tend to be judgmental and make comments after I'm off of those Zooms or whatever we're doing.
You're wondering who's sitting there with nothing on.
I want to know. I think we deserve that. We don't have to see it.
If we're really going to get honest, if this is the time to get honest and deal with things as they are, then everybody stand up.
Oh. It's a podcast, Dean. They can't see us.
Oh.
So, but
we should admit.
Can I sit down now?
Okay. I mean, it's summertime, so I'm sitting here in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt.
As am I.
And shorts and a t-shirt.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I've got sandals on my feet.
All right.
Yeah. It's very comfortable. It's very delightful.
This is part of the deception. It's so easy to think that nothing's wrong.
So I've got a little quick quiz for you here that I didn't warn you at all about.
Okay.
Based on what you were just talking about with like Zoom meetings and other types of meetings that are out there for the different ways. I don't mean we're not getting paid by Zoom, although we could be, but we're not. So it could be any kind of thing like that where you're doing your video call back to a group of people, a single person, whatever. And the complications that Dean was talking about or maybe they're not complications, but what's in the background, all that kind of stuff. There was a case, I'm going to say probably about 6 weeks ago, let's say, that where a young man was doing let's say a Zoom call, and he was on with many other people. He was the main person speaking, and unaware of this, or maybe not caring, I don't know, his live-in girlfriend came out of the bathroom having taken a shower and walked behind him completely naked. And there was no avoiding it because of the fact that it was going out live at that point. She didn't dwell, but she didn't go rapidly. So she was clearly obvious. So my question to you is this. Generally speaking, what cultures around the world would find that more or less offensive?
Well, that raises the issue of, is the human body and nudity considered something that's okay in some cultures to reveal in public, or is it not okay?
And we have spoken of this early. If you haven't listened to it, we have an early podcast that does talk about nudity. But it sort of addresses that as well. But go ahead. I'm interrupting you because I have to pretend I have a role in this.
Yeah. It's a good question, right? And there could be lots of reasons why a culture would be uncomfortable with revealing nudity in public versus comfortable with it, right? It could be religious. It could be it could be well, that would be theologic, but it could be the result of the history of the culture, where the public space and the public sphere is defined in certain ways differently from the way it may be defined in other places because of the historical forces that created that culture. So there could be lots of reasons for it, but basically it comes down to the comfort level with the exposure of nudity in the public space. And I think the whole thing with COVID right now kind of gives everybody a pass on this. I mean, I think that when she walked by, a lot of people were probably shocked.
Mm-hmm.
In some cultures, more shocked than in others.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody went, "Oh, but that's the way things are right now."
Yes.
It's just a more extreme version of the baby crying and the dog walking by. So we all kind of have a pass. I think there's a certain amount of forgiveness in all of this because we're all having to figure out how to do this now. Maybe that was really staged. I don't know.
Go.
Yeah. Or maybe she was like his credibility shelf. You know what I mean?
Maybe it did give him
instead of
credit
instead of the
Yes.
bookshelf with all of the books that he's written over his right shoulder, he has his girlfriend walk by. What's more interesting, an academic book that was written
Really?
10 years ago, or her?
Well, good for both of them.
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, which one's got the box office?
Well, I believe that it was posted, and you probably could find it now if you wanted to go look for it on YouTube or something like that. That was posted up there in some form.
And he's got 5 million views because of this.
Absolutely,
right?
And so your point is well taken.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be cynical, but maybe this was all staged.
It could have been. I mean, it also may, if it was. Besides the credibility of the person who was zooming at that point, it was. What else are you trying to accomplish with that? Are you trying to distract from the main point that was being made at that time?
Yeah, maybe he just needed an out and kind of gave her a signal, and she walked by.
Could be. There might have been a trigger that she would then walk out of the room.
We're in a world that is brand new. We have no idea, how to manage all of this uncertainty. There's uncertainty everywhere. We're swimming in uncertainty.
I'm uncertain what I'm doing right now.
I think that's an interesting, cultural issue. Some cultures are more comfortable with uncertainty, and they have different ways of dealing with uncertainty. And other cultures get absolutely freaked out about it and have to nail everything down all the time before they can do anything. So this issue of the degree of comfort that we have with not knowing. And what are our defenses around that? I think is very interesting. We can pull that one out of the hat,
Well, you go right ahead and pull it out. It's
out of the hat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was.
We're not doing
brain was somewhere else.
We're not doing a Zoom call.
I see.
or
Zoom maybe
here's
too
the thing.
presumptive.
Why don't we? Like everybody's wondering. Well, how do we greet people from now on in this new world? The handshake is dead. We can't shake hands anymore. We certainly can't hug. You don't have to worry about giving people 2 kisses or 3 kisses or 4 kisses because nobody's doing any kisses at all.
Right.
So, how do we greet people? I think when this first started, there was talk of like giving people a hand bump or
Excuse me? I'm sorry. What?
A hand bump.
A hand bump.
A hand bump.
Okay.
Or an elbow jab.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. That was and people I've still seen some people use
and some people using this as an excuse, like you stick your elbow in somebody's eye and then you go Oh, wait a minute.
Who's
Wait,
using
no,
that?
I just said hello. It's the new way of saying hello.
it's
In my culture, that's how we say hello now in the
Ah.
post-COVID world.
I see.
Stick-
Well,
oh, so how does that go? Well, you stick your elbow in hard and fast in the other person's eye.
in their eye. I do think there may be some cultures around that would enjoy that in some form.
Well, again,
I mean, doing it, not receiving it.
so-
I think.
well, it has to be reciprocal,
Well,
or else it's not
okay.
a greeting.
Right.
So I'm thinking, here's what we do. We make a new rule that addresses this whole issue of uncertainty and just say, on a Zoom call or any techno meeting, what we do is we all have to just, when we greet, how do we greet each other? We all have to stand up. Just stand up. And if you're wearing your pajamas or not wearing anything at all, well, that was your decision. And it may start to affect how we view things like public nudity.
But once we
This
start,
is a new world, new opportunities. here.
doesn't it return us to?
I'm very optimistic.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm really glad that you're the person who's optimistic right
we
now.
have all these new openings, new ways of thinking, new ways of possibly doing things that this has forced that we've never thought of before.
So you're saying that if we stand up, this is going to enlighten us at this level. then.
It depends on what everybody's wearing.
Well, but if I know I'm going to stand up, wouldn't I wear what I would normally wear if we had
Depends
not
on
had
your-
the pandemic?
It depends on your culture.
Okay, I think we are just circled back around to my original question about the young lady without clothes and who would be offended. You gave me a nice general summation of that. Can you point out a couple of examples of some cultures that might be very comfortable with it, and perhaps not even find it all that surprising?
In the public space, again, it would
Yeah.
have to be very well defined.
Okay.
But I think of some Mediterranean cultures which are fundamentally very conservative, but there are certain times and certain places, like a beach in the summertime, where nudity is acceptable. Specifically for women, to sunbathe without a top,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're talking the Riviera comes to mind. Am I wrong?
Yes, when I said Mediterranean, let me Latin European Mediterranean,
Uh-huh.
certainly not North African Mediterranean, right?
Right.
Right.
So throughout those areas there. Okay.
But see, that's very specific and very well defined, right?
Right.
I also
And
think
that's fair.
I also think of some Scandinavian cultures in terms of how families and friends relate with each other.
Certainly.
The tradition of the sauna, and there's everyone walks into the sauna nude, and this is true for the family as well as close friends.
There are, and perhaps I'm wrong, but aren't there some Asian baths that are also both genders? And
Both genders together, I'm not certain about that. I'd have to.
Okay, well, I
investigate that.
do
Maybe
believe
Torin
that
can
once the
look.
pandemic is over, we might have to make a field trip to find out if that's true or not.
Well, it's certainly an investigative trip.
I
right,
think so.
Which is all deductible, by the way.
Is it?
Yes, it's
Great.
it's called research. Right.
or we could have Torin research that for us.
Yes. Off I
But
go.
I don't have a lot of
not
hope
yet?
there.
Well, so this is why we have to do it in person. Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know how soon
right.
we can get back on a plane. But
Well, yeah.
these
it's-
are all the uncertainties that we have to cope with. That's all.
I don't
we're
think
doing.
I'm up for getting on a plane and staying on it to the other side of the world right now.
Yeah, for 13, 14, 15 hours on a plane.
That's not inviting in normal circumstances.
Mhm.
So, all right, good. You just brought up an area that I'm going to get to. And that was Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, right.
And in this pandemic, the response to how to move forward or put things on hold or whatever the particular country/culture is looking at was different in the Scandinavian countries in between them. but most obviously different with Sweden, which decided, and I'm probably going to be off a little bit, but I'm trying to be as fair as I can with this, decided basically to move on ahead and observing many of the things that we've been observing hopefully been observing in other parts of the world, social distancing and masks and other things like that, but not doing it in a mandatory and shut down mode. Continuing to leave stores, restaurants open, continuing to leave schools open. And so within an attempt, as I understand from what they're saying, an attempt to keep their economy as good as possible and to build up a herd immunity as a possible defense against a second surge. We haven't gotten to the second surge part yet, and there is a whole lot of discussion as to whether that was a smart thing or a bad thing or a stupid thing.
Well, especially since the number of deaths dramatically increased.
Well, it did. But they were saying in all of that they understood that, but they didn't think that was something that was avoidable in the long term anyway. What they were trying to do was, instead of having the other impacts that other places are experiencing, they were trying to make it so that they could continue on and keep things at a higher level. Now, whether that is working or not and so on is really not where I'm heading with this, but more looking at this culture of Scandinavia, of the culture specifically of Sweden, and the dominant ones anyway, and saying, does something stand out in that as to why they would choose? Norway didn't do this. Finland didn't do this. Denmark didn't do this. So is there something in the Swedish culture that says we're going to try this? We're going to go upstream while everybody else is going with the
cultural
current.
Piece to this?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there is. First of all, I do think in Denmark they were also, and Torin, if you can check on this, that'd be great. But I do think in Denmark, they also did not shut down completely, and they were open to a certain degree. Maybe not to the same degree. Maybe it's an issue of degrees.
That's
right?
as I understand.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that there is a general tendency in Scandinavian culture because of their I think from a fundamental point in their culture, there is this collective responsibility that gets reflected in government policy, and the whole idea of the socialist legacy that exists in Scandinavian cultures comes out of this. That government is there to create policy that is to the benefit of all of the people as the collective citizenry. And, they made this calculation based on factors that are unique to Sweden. For example, in many Scandinavian cultures, men and women live together, families live together, but they're not married. Or I think in Sweden, it has the highest, and I may not be 100% right on this, Torin, if you can check it, but a very high rate of single parent families. So maybe the highest in Scandinavia.
Okay.
It's a significant percentage. So what you have there is then if mom can't work, or if mom has to work, and there's no other parent, then the responsibility for the kids goes to the grandparents. And the grandparents are the most vulnerable group.
Right.
One of the most vulnerable groups. And to the schools and the teachers, which may need to be closed. So then it really is all on the grandparents.
Right.
So I think they went through this kind of calculation, and this is why they figured the best way out is to try to develop herd immunity.
Keep it off the grandparents or whomever might suffer.
And I'm
from
sure there are many other factors that I was not involved in this, so I'm not aware of it. But these are some of the cultural considerations that presuming that this was all done with the best of intentions, as no doubt it was, that was probably part of the calculus.
All right. Okay, listen, The way to get hold of us is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is Oops Culture Show. Whether this is the first episode or the third episode or whatever episode that you've listened to, if you're still listening at this point, I think you might like this. And if you do, you should really subscribe. Because if you subscribe, these things will just show up for you, and you can listen to them whenever you want to. That's the best way to go, really, honestly. I know what I'm talking about. All right, so just subscribe through iTunes or through wherever you get your podcasts from. But do it today, okay? Subscribe. Thank you. In the United States, there's a lot of discussion. Did we react too late? Which probably is true. We probably did do that.
Well, the cultural piece for me in the U.S. that I find so fascinating is this resistance to mask wearing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This illogical resistance to mask wearing and the rejection of science and fact.
Right.
And what are the cultural elements to that?
Yeah.
Right. And
that's a great question.
There is this very, very strong fundamental piece of American culture based on individualism. And some would even say toxic individualism. Now, all elements of cultures, for the most part, come in degrees. And there's tremendous benefit as well as tremendous downside when you have a particular aspect of culture that is in the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And individualism in the United States is extreme. If you compare it to the way other cultures value the idea of individualism, the mythology of the lone cowboy out on the prairie taking care of himself and his family, with a gun and not depending on anybody else, not depending on government.
Right.
Certainly.
Right.
So there's this inherent rejection of government authority.
Yes.
Which is built right into, it's baked into the DNA of the culture. Now,
And I might say baked so deeply that even in areas where we have government programs that are clearly beneficial to a vast percentage of the population in the United States, they will complain and degrade them. I'm talking about most of the population will degrade them and pick on them, and do so because it is a government program, and yet they're benefiting from them on some cases daily basis.
Yes, we could get into the politics of this because this kind of thing gets manipulated by the two political parties.
It is currently,
right.
Yes.
So that you can even get people to vote against their own self-interest.
Absolutely.
If you're smart and clever and play the individualism card. Because oftentimes these folks are feeling like if I can resist, if I can challenge the government, if I can do things on my own and not have to follow government policy or suggestions or even authorizations or recommendations. CDC is just making recommendations.
Right.
These are not, I'm going to take care of this myself. I don't have to listen to anybody else. And if you're given a reason why you shouldn't by the politicians, then this plays to a certain base of people who have toxic individualism.
Yes.
Yes. Who live their lives with this.
It is really playing that game. Not that it isn't playing the game even in Sweden because perhaps part of the thought process for those who were making the decisions was that they needed to come up with a decision that the majority of Swedes would cooperate with. In the United States, the gamut that we run from who feels one way or another is so broad that trying to find something that's going to satisfy the issue across the country is it's not virtually impossible. It is impossible.
Well, there have been times when the country has come together for a collective good. And
we can probably count them on one hand.
But
right.
these are when that's happened, those were moments that were where all politicians and all partisan differences were set aside in order to get people to address the burning need at that moment for collective solidarity.
Yes.
That's not happening now.
It's not happening now. However, I do want to say, from a personal viewpoint, I'm a U.S. natural-born citizen and have lived here my entire life. I say that because I'm picking on the country now. But it was my take back in late February when this became a strong discussion point and what we were going to do, and then into the beginning of March, which we delayed even farther because of many of the things you've been talking about. I was of the opinion that any kind of shutdown, lockdown, quarantine was going to successfully work in this country for about 2 weeks, and that after that it would deteriorate rapidly. Now, I am going to say that I was wrong, that it lasted longer than I thought it would. Not that everybody went along with it, because they didn't. There's the whole thing here of people thinking this is all made up and it's not real.
A
and
hoax,
so on.
right?
Yeah.
They should go to an emergency room.
We will, exactly. Well, and some have, because they've come down with this, with COVID, and ended up in emergency rooms, and in some cases not left, which is a sad story, but nonetheless true. But that's not a huge percentage. So you've got the majority of these people out there, and all of these things you just talked about started creeping back in at a certain point, and until we get to where we are today.
That's how strong this element of U.S. culture
Absolutely.
is.
Yes.
Unless you have authorities, political leaders pushing back against it, you're going to have this seeping back in rather quickly.
Oh, yes.
And to the point where you can't then come up with national policy to actually address the issue, which is why without this kind of leadership, pushing for everyone to do what needs to be done, because we know what needs to be done.
Yes.
And if it had been done that way, if you'd shut down for 6 to 8 weeks, right when this thing was identified, and done it on a national level, this probably would have been taken care of. And even if my prediction is not valid, it would have been worth the effort to try it,
Right.
than to suffer what we're suffering now.
Well, absolutely. Now, however, because of the factors, the cultural factors you've addressed, the response in many places, even in what I would consider among people who are very intelligent, and who, under normal circumstances, tend to be very clear thinking, have drifted toward, for lack of a better term, strangeness, and in some of that strangeness is that resistance, that mask wearing. Let's just poke at the cultural aspect of mask
it's
wearing.
the resistance to authority or anything that
Yes.
is seen as coming to me, that
Regardless of whether
challenges
it's going to
my
help
right.
me or not.
Right. This is a much stronger need.
And I even may think that you're trying to undermine me.
That's right.
And I will reach for and find, and again, in today's world where there is information everywhere of any kind you really want to find, you will find people supposedly with backgrounds that should be listened to because they are scientists, doctors, whatever, that will say wearing a mask is worse for you for various reasons.
Well, you can find anybody, and you can probably pay anybody, certain people, to say what you want them to say.
And with that with the cultural aspect you're talking about, they grab it, they run with it. And so now you're trying to do something to me, which is very much that reaction you said.
That's right. That's right.
You're trying to do something to me with this. I can't trust you. So I'm going to end up sick because of the mask.
Well, the whole issue of the vaccine, everyone says, well, when the vaccine comes, this will all be solved. There's a significant percentage of people in the United States who won't take the vaccine because they're afraid that it's a government plot to kill them.
Right.
Right. So
and
this element of extreme individualism is something that's been woven through the culture since the beginning. We had a revolution against authority.
Yes.
The whole idea of having of revolting against authority, and how do we keep authority from telling us what to do? the political ideology that government exists to get out of my way,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, let's say, the more European tradition where government exists to provide for the citizens
Yes.
and to take care of and protect the citizens. We had a revolution against that kind of European idea, and where the government exists to protect the rights of the individual in the U.S., as opposed to in Europe, for example, the government exists by the people to protect the people.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means that certain individual rights have to be given up for a greater collective good, then that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And so the mask wearing thing is very interesting. I mean, I think the resistance to mask wearing is directly connected in the United States to this extreme individualism.
Sure.
And you know, when the masks when that became an issue, wear a mask, it was immediately in the U.S. interpreted as to protect yourself.
Right. Right.
That was the default.
Right. I'm just protecting myself.
And it had to be explained that it's really not protecting you. The reason why you need to wear the mask is in case you are infected and you don't know it.
Right. Which
to
was
protect
possible.
others from getting it. That is a very hard sell in individualist United States culture.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Now, the flip side of that is Asia, where for decades, if you had a cold, you put a mask on.
Yeah.
To protect others from getting your cold.
Right.
It wasn't to protect it wasn't to prevent you from getting a cold. You already had a cold. If you walked down the street in Tokyo 10, 15, 20 years ago and you saw people with a mask, they were saying, I have a cold and I'm not going to infect you.
Right.
This is a much more
This is more of a group culture.
This is a collectivist culture.
Yes.
Where individual rights, and you see this throughout Asia, where individual rights are subordinate to what is defined as the collective good. The problem there, when you have these more extreme collectivist cultures,
Mm-hmm.
I would call this toxic collectivism
Right.
in some ways. The best example I think of that is China, where
Right.
all individual rights are suspect, and everything is interpreted through the lens of the state.
Yes.
Right. Look, you can have the end result at the end of the day in either case is a horrible dystopia, because both extremes are dangerous.
Right.
But if you walk away from those extremes, right now, let's just deal with the mask. What you've got is a culture like in Asia where people are protecting each other from it.
Yes.
It's my responsibility to protect you from my cold, as opposed to in the U.S. where, well, it's not up to me. Protect yourself
Right.
from me.
Right. Well, and looking at both of those basically extreme culture viewpoints, it gets us back to Sweden, where they were trying to find, it appears, they were trying to find that middle ground that would get people to operate. Successful, not successful, but do you see it as that culture, as you mentioned before, we'll look at it in those terms. We'll look at it with a degree of individuality, with a degree of group, a group sense, and try to say, okay, where are we? Should we be heading to satisfy both as much as we can?
The irony is that you referred to it as kind of like a middle ground, and for years, Scandinavian socialism is referred to as the middle way.
Mm.
And
right, I have heard that. Yes.
And I think what they were attempting to do was do the best they could to synthesize these things.
Sure.
Right, in a way that would create, that was driven by trying to find a way to get to the collective good. The collective good.
Yeah.
I don't think in the U.S., whatever policy does exist, and that's questionable,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of it is driven by how do we get to the collective good.
No, it's not. It's brought up occasionally, but it's usually brought up in a very vague way, and in some cases, a negative way.
Oh, it's not necessarily seen as a good thing.
Right.
Not if the role of government is to get out of the way of the individual.
In the United States, the group good becomes important to the individual when the individual is directly impacted by what is happening to that particular group.
And when wise leaders know that we've got a situation where we need to be driven by the collective good.
Yes.
And with that kind of leadership, we can get there.
Yeah.
And we have gotten there before.
Yes.
But it's a fight in the U.S.
It is a fight.
against
Every day.
toxic individualism.
Every day. And which is why I thought our cooperation on any higher level would only last a couple of weeks. I undershot it, but unfortunately I didn't shoot it by a lot more.
Yeah.
But that being said, let me turn you into Nostradamus. Looking into the future with Nostradamus.
Yes.
All right. Let's say that we do survive this pandemic and that it at least recedes into something that we can handle, like the flu, which the flu kills a lot of people every year in the United States.
And everywhere.
It does,
Yeah.
but I'm specifically addressing the culture of the United States right now. And I'm looking, let's say we've gotten to that point. So there is a vaccine, and some people will take it, and a few won't. Hopefully most will, and it will help control things. But it may roll around again in the next year that we have to treat it with another vaccine or something along those lines. Let's say we've at least gotten to that point now. In the United States, does mask wearing become something that is done on a much greater level voluntarily? Does the industry of selling masks, which is a significant industry right now here, it was almost a zero industry outside of the medical industry prior to this. So it is one now. Does it stay? Will it last? Will we take it into consideration when we have a cold? I teach in colleges. Will colleges be saying to students on a regular basis, wear a mask?
Well, I joked before that I'm feeling optimistic,
Yeah.
and what I was referring to is it's a hard place to get to. You wake up every morning and today it listens to the news.
It's a trip.
It's
yes.
it's a journey, and I got to take a minute and try to focus. So and regain my optimism. But the reason I say that is because if we're wise, and if our leadership is wise, and if the stars, align in this thing, we have a moment right now. We have an opportunity to look at ourselves as cultures, as individuals, and make some decisions, and maybe reflect on this issue and many other issues. But let's take this one issue of toxic individualism and say, you know what? It's great in some cases, but it ain't so great in other cases. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can't and shouldn't be that way, because the problems that we've got to deal with require a concept of collective good and policies and plans to get there.
So, yes or no, the United States will continue to have a mask industry, and it will be significant, and people will tend far more often to be mask wearing when they are ill. Yes or no?
On Halloween.
Well, I've got my Richard Nixon mask ready to go. So I don't know
see,
why I haven't been wearing it, actually.
I want to see. I haven't seen the Venetian plague masks that I anticipated.
Oh, the long noses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to see some of those. I'd go out and buy those and wear those right now.
You probably can find them. I'm sure you can.
Because in Venice, when they had the plague, people walked around with masks. And they had these long,
spooky-looking masks. Yeah. I think I'll let you do that. I'm going to pass on that one. But all right, I think we have. I can't say we've solved the pandemic, because unfortunately, it's not solved. We're still stuck in the middle of it right now. But
we're going to probably have to have a lot of podcasts still, socially distanced
yes.
under this tree.
I'm hoping that we can get to a point where when the weather, since we are generally located in the northeastern United States, when the weather turns colder and sitting under the tree becomes much more difficult, that we will have gotten to a spot, a place in this country, at the very least in this region, but let's say the country, where we can go back inside and not worry about the transmission like we do have to logically worry about now.
Right now, we're still in a place where we can enjoy being outside and this glorious weather and a summer. I am apprehensive about what this winter is going to bring.
I think that there is one aspect of the U.S. culture that is very, very strong, and that is our desire to make money from any type of thing that comes along we can possibly make money on. And I think that some of these companies that are working on vaccines and even the treatments besides the vaccines are seeing very large dollar signs ahead of them. And I think that will, because they're actually even working on, at this stage in 2020, they are working on creating the ones they think have the best chance so that when they get some sort of approval, they actually will be ready to roll out. That's unheard of in the United States.
I want to be careful. I think you're absolutely right, and I think we need to be careful, however, in a scenario where everybody is going to start to jump and self-congratulate ourselves on the success of the vaccine and use it as proof of the validity of capitalism and the marketplace driving policy.
There's no chance it won't be used as that. That's as deeply ingrained into the culture of the U.S. as the individualism itself.
Right.
It just is. Your point on the leadership and the strength of it, and the willingness to confront those situations when they are not in the overall best interest. Well, that's what we're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an election coming up in November. Thank goodness. And there's a lot of talk of how that's going to happen. I recall 4 years ago when there was a lot of talk on how it was going to happen, and didn't happen that way. So there's much to do with that. So we have many things to talk about, and yes, we will be back before too long and talking about those and other things and other parts of the world and other cultures. And we're happy to hear from you if you're out there wondering. We'd love to hear of Sweden. Please let us know. Talk to us. Tell us what we got wrong. Tell us what we got right. Anyone who can tell us about their language and their word for booger, please get to us and let us know that. I think that's vitally important that the world understand that on a global impact.
Well, very important. I mean, let's put our priorities straight.
Well, let's say 100% of the humans on this planet.
We all share it.
We have boogers.
Right.
Like it or not, you got a booger.
So, what's the best way to talk about that?
Up front. Let's drag it out here in front of everybody.
Right,
let's
drag it out.
Let's vocally stand up in front of them and show our boogers to the world. Okay, I'm vocally sitting down now because that was kind of disgusting. Anyway.
We can all just be 8-year-old boys.
Well, I have to say that for us, that's not a leap.
Not a leap at all.
No. Well, thank you, Torrin. Thank you for your help, as little as there was. And Dean Foster, again, you have shed light on the amazing world of culture in around the world. Was that redundant?
Was it redundant?
Yeah.
Was it redundant?
I don't know.
Am I being redundant?
What's that? Well, thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Tom. Great fun.
It was. And, even in this world where sitting down and not wearing pants while you're on a Zoom, still, oops.
Your culture's showing.
Smell ya. Okay, listen, the way to get hold of us is oopscultureshow@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is oopscultureshow. Whether this is the first episode or the third episode or whatever episode that you've listened to, you should really subscribe. That's the best way to go, really, honestly. I know what I'm talking about. All right, so just subscribe through iTunes or through wherever you get your podcasts from. Subscribe. Thank you.
Is your new year still falling flat? Do you avoid stairs with multiple steps? You are not alone. This year, millions will be diagnosed with low energy or low E. But there's a cure. Now through January 31st, join Planet Fitness for just $1 down, $10 a month, no commitment. With clean, spacious clubs and tons of equipment, you can boost your energy after just one workout. Leave low E behind and find your big fitness energy at Planet Fitness. Join in the free PF app for $1 down, $10 a month. Cancel anytime. Deal ends Tuesday, January 31st. See Home Club for details.